USCIS is going to talk to your neighbors to see if you're a good person deserving citizenship. Hi, I'm Jim Hacking, immigration lawyer practicing law throughout the United States out of our offices in St. Louis, San Diego, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, Illinois. In today's video, we're going to talk about a new Trump DHS USCIS policy that would allow immigration officers to go talk to your neighbors, to your coworkers, to your boss, to see if you're a good person deserving U.S. citizenship. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about this new announcement. We're going to talk about where this policy is coming from, how we think it's going to work logistically, what we think is really going on, and how you can set yourself up for success at U.S. citizenship and immigration services with this new rule. This is going to cause a big mess and delays, and we want you to be ready. So how did we get here? There's a law from 1952 that has been on the books now for 73 years. No one has thought about this law or applied this law for decades, but the same people from Project 2025 and Trump's Department of Homeland Security, who are trying to make citizenship as hard as possible, have scoured the statutes to look for ways to slow down legal immigration to the United States and to make it harder for green card holders to get their citizenship. Under Section 335A of the Immigration and Nationality Act, as amended in 1952, Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS, which is the precursor to USCIS, was required to do a personal investigation of each person applying for U.S. citizenship. Let me read you quickly the requirements from that section. The Immigration Service was supposed to go talk to people near your residence and your employment and to obtain written findings on your moral character, your attachment to the Constitution, and your disposition to good order. Indeed, up until 1981, naturalization applicants were required to get 2 U.S. citizens to swear to their good character. But starting in the 1990s, the Immigration Service stopped all that. They said, this is ridiculous. We have modern technology. We're going to do an FBI background check and look at your criminal records to see if there's a reason why you shouldn't become a U.S. citizen. And then in a federal registry entry by INS in the 1990s, they said that the FBI background check satisfied their statutory requirement to determine whether someone was a person of good moral character and deserving of U.S. citizenship. Now, in actuality, the regulations do still mention neighborhood investigations, but this has not been a policy or a procedure at USCIS or even the INS for decades. So the bottom line is, for the last 30 years, USCIS has treated the FBI background check as a de facto substitution for neighborhood investigations. On August 26, 2025, USC announced, we're not following that policy anymore. We're going back to neighborhood investigations. We're not giving a blanket waiver to all naturalization applicants. Instead, we're going to look at this on a case-by-case basis. What does that mean? That means USCIS officers have even more discretion in who they're going to allow to become a U.S. citizen. So if an officer feels that a neighborhood investigation is warranted in your case, that means that before you get approved for citizenship, they're going to come out, knock on doors, talk to your neighbors, talk to your coworkers, talk to your boss to see if you are indeed a good person. Most likely, USCIS is also going to require you to submit testimonial evidence, maybe in the form of affidavits from your neighbors, from your friends, that you are a good person, that you have followed the law since becoming a lawful permanent resident, and that you would make a great U.S. citizen who adheres to the Constitution. Now, I believe in my heart of hearts that this is all a pretext. What USCIS wants to do is to consolidate its power with Immigration Customs Enforcement. Remember, the Project 2025 crowd wants those agencies to be combined. They want there to be one big immigration service and for it to be enforcement only. And so if you think about that rule and then think about the way they're going to apply this rule, then you begin to understand that what they really want to do is to send immigration officers out into the neighborhoods to talk to people. And they're doing it not because necessarily your naturalization case needs it, but rather because they want to start having immigration officers knocking on doors, intimidating people, maybe finding other immigrants who don't deserve to be here and taking action that way. We have seen many instances in the past of USCIS using investigations in one area for enforcement in another. So it's not above USCIS to have a pretext and to say, well, we want to go out and investigate people's good moral character to see if they're becoming a citizen or not. Instead, what they really want to do is knock on doors to scare communities, to have officers out with legal authority to be in neighborhoods and to get testimony from neighbors. What's really going on here? They want to scare immigrants. They want to scare them from applying for citizenship. They want to slow down legal immigration to the United States. If they keep you from getting your citizenship, then you're not going to be able to sponsor your mom and dad to come to the United States or your brothers and sisters. That's what this is really all about. That plus scaring the crap out of people by having immigration officers walking around in neighborhoods, knocking on doors. We have to look at this in the overall context of what USCIS has been doing since Donald Trump took office and what the Project 2025 people are trying to do. They don't want people to become U.S. citizens. They don't want people acclimating and assimilating into U.S. society. What they really want is to slow down legal immigration to the United States. So if you look at all the changes that they've been making, they've raised the fees. They've made it harder for an officer to approve a case. They've given officers much more discretion as to whether or not someone is a person of good moral character. They have made it so that you have to meet a higher burden and provide more evidence than you ever did before. They're going far beyond what the statute and the regulations called for, and this is just one more way that they are trying to make it harder for lawful permanent residents who have followed the rules, who are legally and statutorily eligible for citizenship, from actually getting their citizenship, because they're giving all this power to an immigration officer to decide whether you're a good person and whether you get your citizenship. And in addition, you have to understand that USCIS is going over every statute, every regulation, looking for ways to grab more and more power and to make it harder to challenge denials of citizenship. That's what they're all about. Let's talk about the logistical consequences of this new approach. Now, if USCIS is going to require background checks, knocking on doors for 10%, 20%, 40%, 80% of people that apply for naturalization, that's going to, by definition, severely slow down a system that is already broken, a system that is already way too slow. And what happens in situations where you don't like your neighbor or you don't know your neighbor? There are lots of people walking around in New York City and Philadelphia and Amarillo, Texas, who live a quiet life. They're good people. They have followed all the rules. And then USCIS is going to go out in the middle of the night, in the morning, knocking on doors, saying, hey, do you know Joe Smith? He just applied for citizenship. We're investigating him. Do you think he's a good person? Do you think he follows the rules? Oh no, he had a party last night and his music was way too loud. I asked him to turn it down at 11 and they didn't really get quiet till midnight. I don't even like that guy. Why would you ever give citizenship to that guy? And you're giving all this power not only to USCIS officers, but neighbors. And who knows what biases those neighbors have. Those neighbors might be rabid Trumpers who think everybody with brown skin deserves to be deported. They might hate everybody that lives next to them. They might love everybody that lives next to them. But when you're talking about going out and getting hearsay evidence from neighbors and coworkers, that's just ripe for abuse, ripe for subjectivity, ripe for USCIS officers doing basically whatever they want and denying whomever they want. And more importantly, it's going to lead to lots of denials that are patently unfair, where people are not given the opportunity to face their accusers and have their day in court. Instead, they're going to be stuck with a naturalization denial because some officer said, oh, I found this one guy who lived down the street from you who said you're a jerk. And that brings up the legal problems with this approach. We have to ask ourselves, is this what Congress intended? Is this the way we want to do things? Is this the way that we find out whether or not someone is in fact a U.S. citizen? And they can dust off all these laws from the 1950s. They can bring back all these requirements. That's apparently what they're planning to do. But is that really what we want as Americans? Is that really what we want our country to be about? Is this what we want neighbors reporting on neighbors? I mean, I think there's a big question as to when they start something with immigrants, it's coming to U.S. citizens later. And what I mean by that is they want to start conditioning us for it to be normal for federal agents to knock on doors to ask about neighbors. I don't think it's that much of a stretch for them to then say, well, we want to know more about these other people, like people that are already U.S. citizens. And so it's not a big jump from having immigrants checked out by USCIS officers knocking on doors to having law enforcement just randomly knocking on doors, talking to people about whomever they want. They want to condition us to the normalcy of federal agents knocking on doors, talking about neighbors. That's the real problem. And I believe that when Congress eliminated the two-witness rule in 1981, that what they were doing was demonstrating a modernity, a update to the system, that they don't need to go out and do background checks. They haven't done it for 50 years. And now these guys who hate immigrants, who want to stop legal immigration to the United States, are trying to bring it back. So whenever I hear something like that, I get suspicious, and you should be suspicious too. And that brings us to, what should immigrants do now? Now that this new rule is in effect, if you already have your naturalization case on file, if you are getting ready to apply, you have to start developing evidence of your good moral character. Now, we already knew that because of the changes from a few weeks ago, but now they're going to want testimony from friends and neighbors. So I would try to cut that off at the pass and create 3 or 4 or 5 affidavits. Talk to your neighbors, maybe hire a lawyer to help you with this, because you're talking about getting testimony about your good moral character. These rule changes might get challenged in court, but they might not. And in fact, if your case is pending now, you're subject to this rule. And so if you want to get your particular case approved, you have to play their game, at least until some judge shuts these new rules down. You're under this approach, and so you need to go out, talk to your lawyer, have them investigate with your neighbors and get affidavits from your neighbors to establish that you follow the rules, that you're a good person to live with, that we like having you in the neighborhood. I know it sounds crazy, I know it sounds nuts, but this is something you're going to have to do now if you want to become a U.S. citizen here in 2025 and beyond. And when it comes to these letters, remember, you have to have these notarized. You need to have your friend or neighbor sign the statement regarding your naturalization application and your good moral character under oath in front of a notary, because if you don't do that, USCIS will disregard that as evidence, and that might cause them to go out and investigate you. And I'm just going to throw this out there as well. My wife, Amani, who's a brilliant immigration attorney, said to me the other day, Jim, I believe that in this day and age, in 2025, 7 months into the Trump administration, no immigrant should apply for any immigration benefit without an attorney. And I think that's definitely true here. You're going to need the assistance of an attorney to start meeting all these crazy rules and regulations that they've superimposed onto naturalization cases. So in summary, I think that it's scary that they're dusting off rules from the 1950s. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. There's no real problem with people becoming citizens. They just don't want people to become citizens. So you need to be aware of these new rule changes. You need to read the rule itself. You need to understand how you're going to have to meet a higher burden. You're going to have to satisfy some subjective USCIS officer who's probably crabby, who probably doesn't like immigrants, and you're going to have to reach this higher standard to convince them that not only are you a person of good moral character, but your friends and neighbors agree that you're a person of good moral character, because if you don't, then they're going to walk down your street, knock on people's doors and say, hey, tell me about Joe. He's applying for citizenship. Do you think he's a good person? Do you think he's been following the rules since becoming a lawful person? Do you think he's been following the rules since becoming a lawful permanent resident? Do you think we should allow him to become a U.S. citizen? These are crazy times, but these are the standards. These are the rules. So if you want to become a U.S. citizen, you got to play the game. So if you'd like our help to become a U.S. citizen, if you're worried about these new rules and you understand the value that an immigration attorney can deliver, give us a call at 314-961-8200 or email us info@hackingimmigrationlaw.com. That's for people who want to hire us. If you don't want to hire us, or if you're not really thinking about that, that's totally fine too. We'd love to work with you, but if that's the case, you can join our free immigrant home Facebook group. There's almost 16,000 people in there talking about the immigration process, talking about rule changes like this. We have our TikTok channel @Immigration Hacking, where we sort of have fun with immigration news and keeping you up to date. We have our YouTube channel where we post new videos like this one. You can subscribe to it, turn on your alarm so that whenever we post a new video, you get alerted. And then finally, we have our Immigration Answer Show. That's a show that I do 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. That's just me answering immigrants' questions, and we'd love to have you join us there. If you want to get in the waiting room to ask me a question, just text the word show to 314-470-3300. Thanks so much, and we'll see you on the next video.